Well, I think the thing that I'm trying to process is some of my understanding of story is actually right now it's been in transition as I've spent the last couple of years, you know, studying the gospels every week, and the following Jesus Friday and just really believing that the gospels are so unique. In other words, it's important to understand the categories of stories that exist. And I realized that I was being kind of hyper Western in my view of stories, which is that there are stories that are, that are kind of like useless, like that didn't actually communicate anything very valuable, so we forget about it. We might tell it's like fun anecdote. Then there's like fun stories that get repeated and that are important in the sense that they are entertaining, but they don't actually communicate any particular major truth. But then there's this one kind of story where it sort of symbolizes the greater truths or greater values so well that it becomes the lore of the family, and that it becomes valuable to preserve if you're trying to create a kind of family culture. And when I read the Gospels, there's so many stories about Jesus. John even says at the end of his gospel, like, this is just the tiny tip of the iceberg. There's way more. But the question you have to ask is, what how did those stories get in the gospels, right? When Jesus, not just talking about the parables, but just the stories about Jesus, like with the healing of the paralytic, or when they asked Jesus, who should we pay taxes to Caesar or not, or the woman caught in adultery or whatever. And each of those moments that would have potentially, you could have said, well, that's just a random event, and there were 100 things that happened today. But of the 100 things that happened today, that encapsulates something. And then the disciples who wrote down that story and retold that story did it because they understood that it uniquely symbolized something of transcendent truth. And it's hard for me because I think, oh, the Western mind's like events are just historical and therefore they're all equal. And that's not true. There's sometimes where events transcend what is just normal, and they begin to express things that are really timeless and important. And so I haven't really, part of this is a mindset thing. And I was telling you, April, that when we do our Shabbat toast, when at everyone's birthday we like to tell stories, and I would say your mom, the symbolic stories that really demonstrate a value that she saw in one of our kids now that they're adults. She'll remember a story when they're 3 and they express that particular character quality in microcosm, right? And it's very, very innocent and early form. And then she'll tell the story and it's like, wow, that 3-year-old is now this 20-year-old. And like that connection is really amazing. But the story, it's the connection that this uniquely really describes their character. And I think that I'm really working through the mindset shift that would allow me to like see certain stories, certain family stories as, oh, that's something that needs to be retold. And like you said, the details start to matter. We want to preserve that somehow. So yeah, I don't know like how to do that exactly. That's kind of like the next step, I think, in the process that I'm describing. But yeah, do either of you have any more thoughts about like how we can do this better as a family?
I know. I mean, I really like when people share stories at the Shabbat table. And I guess just being taught that is something important, something to listen to. That like one thing has really helped me keep respect for like just elders in general. And like when I meet someone like an elder I'm not even related to, and like they try to tell me a story, like I really want to listen because I really value that they're probably telling me something that they learned and they want to pass it on. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think how to do it better. I think probably more documentation, whether that's like recording the grandparent telling the story, or if it's a story. I feel like there's so much about our family history just with you and I, Jeremy, about like how we met and the early years of our marriage and having kids that are really great stories that maybe should be written down. or recorded somehow, whether it's, an audio recording or being written. I think that those things are good to capture because our memories fail us.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think Jeff Bethke at the Integrated before this one in Austin, he gave a talk about the father being the chief storyteller of the family, or taking this responsibility more seriously as fathers and mothers. And there's a book called I think it's called Storyworthy that he referenced. I've been listening to that. It's a guy who there's a event, I think it's called The Moth, where you go and tell stories about your life, and it's like a competition. Anyway, he's won this event over and over again, and he basically unveils in the book how he basically designs a story, something that happens that might be very, very small. What's really remarkable about a lot of his stories are they're really tiny events, but he's able to tell them in such a way that they're very gripping and they're very relatable, and so people find themselves becoming almost vicariously entering into the experience in a powerful way. And so anyway, it's a great book. I've been really enjoying it. This is definitely a skill though that I realize, oh, that's something that you have to learn. Like your parents, they hone this skill by the constant telling and retelling and capturing these stories. One of the things that he recommends in that book is, and I've been working on this for like the last 3 or 4 years. I heard him on an interview he did on the art of manliness, and I was like really affected by it. He's like, every morning or every day, try to write down one sentence of a memorable moment or a story from yesterday, and just think about like one emotion or one thing that happened. And it's amazing to me. Sometimes I'll sit there and I'm like, nothing happened yesterday. And then I'll sit there and think about 20 seconds later, be like, "Oh my gosh, that's right. This big thing happened." Like I completely would have lost it. That could be a really interesting story, but it's something that was about to be thrown in the dustbin. I haven't really quite figured out how to take the next step and begin to catalog some of those things in a way that I can be retelling them. But yeah, I think that's a really helpful practice.